Hi, I'm State Representative Ross Smith from Waterloo. And this November, Black Iowans all across the state can help us decide this election. That is, if we decide to lift our voices and vote. Now, voting by mail is safe and easy. But if you're like me and you want to vote in person, you can do that too. On October 5th, you can vote at your county auditor's office. The only way that we make change in our communities is through voting. For any questions, go to iwillvote.com/Iowa.
And we are back. Welcome back to the Urban Impact Show. I am one of your hosts, Rob Johnson.
And I'm your favorite host, Shekinah Young.
You are the favorite. That vote did come in. That vote did come in. So we got another special guest in the studio.
Absolutely.
We have our very own Congresswoman Cindy Axne.
Yes.
For those who don't know, she is the Congresswoman representing the 3rd Congressional District of Iowa. Mm-hmm. That stretches from Polk County all the way over to Council Bluffs.
I'm happy you mentioned that because sometimes people don't know where their districts are.
That's true.
I had to look up mine. I mean, I don't think it's... But yeah. She's our person.
Yeah. She literally, if you live in, let's say, Ankeny, Johnston, Des Moines, even if it's Altoona, all the way back to Council Bluffs, that means Stewart, Iowa. That means Red Oak.
Yeah.
That means Redfield.
I've never been in some of these places. Shout out if you are watching, though. Let us know, and you should know that you are in the 3rd.
So I've definitely been to these places before, especially on the tour that me, Al, and Will just did. So shout out to the Iowa Vote tour. Shekinah, I'm gonna toss it to you.
Yes, Congresswoman Cindy Axne is in the building with us, and we want to hear from you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you are running for this office.
Well, Shekinah and Rob, thank you so much for having me here, and all the guys that are here to work. Really appreciate it. I ran for office the first time because I was fed up with the decisions that were being made in Washington, and I knew they were hurting me and my family, and I figured if that was the case, they were hurting other families in this district. You know, I'm a small business owner. I'm a mom of 2 teenage boys, and you know, my husband and I have felt the struggles of working class families in this country, whether it was selling my personal items on eBay when I was pregnant with my second son, and we couldn't afford the health insurance to cover my maternity care because it cost $1,000 a month extra to have that because it was a pre-existing condition just 15 years ago. So, you know, I was worried about the things that were happening in Washington. I had stood up in our community for things like all-day kindergarten in West Des Moines when I found out that half the kids literally lost a lottery. We gambled on our children's education.
Wow.
That's gambling on their future. And you know, I said, listen, somebody's got to stand up for our community. And so I just decided to run for something. I didn't know what it was. I just decided to stand up and do something, and I would tell all young people who are interested in making a change, stand up if something's bothering you. You don't know where it could take you. For me, it took me to Congress. And so I've been working for the last couple of years on everything that I think is important for the people here in this district. It's been a heck of a term, starting in a government shutdown and now ending in a pandemic and, you know, social justice issues and unrest in our country. And it's time that we continue to put people in elected positions that will literally listen to their constituents and bring their voices to Washington, or whether it's here locally in city council or the state house or in Washington. So, you know, I didn't ever get into this to put honorable in front of my name. I got in there to solve problems, and I'm delivering for the people here because we deserve it.
Yeah.
And the other thing I'd point out is that when I got out there, I saw how many people are from California, how many are from New York and Florida. We have 4 representatives here.
Yep.
And that means I've got to be the voice of 10 representatives. And that's what it takes to represent a state like this, because far too often states in the heartland have been overlooked.
Yeah.
And it means that we're not getting what we need. Well, I'm changing that. It's time to change that, and it's why I want to be in office again and keep this rolling to protect Iowans and give them opportunity.
Yeah.
It's you.
Yeah, she really did a great job on that.
All
So
of that.
you know, we are nonpartisan.
Yes, we are.
I want that to always be clear.
Yeah.
We are nonpartisan. Now you can check my Facebook for however you want to think I'm gonna vote. But you know, but the show is nonpartisan.
And it's important to note that we reach out to all candidates that are on the ballot. And so if you are watching and you don't see a candidate that you are really in favor of, we just want you to know that we have extended invitations to all candidates. Who you see is who came to the show.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you might want to ask you.
Yeah. So shout out to all of those who come by. So, you know, you mentioned all of this stuff, you know, which is why we're all sitting up here with masks now, right? And there's a clear distinction between, you know, the top of the ticket on who's going to wear a mask, who's not, mask requirements and all of this stuff. We know that COVID-19 has affected African Americans in a very unconventional way, but yet still in line with how we've been treated in this country, right? So African Americans haven't caught COVID at an all-time rate, but we've died from it at an all-time rate. Can you tell us, by sending Cindy Axne back to Congress, what would the COVID response look like to the thousands of people that are going to watch this that look like Shekinah and I and Will?
Well, part of it's the response to COVID, Rob, but really it's about addressing those underlying issues. When I decided to run for this, I sat down and talked to some of my good friends in the community that are representatives for the black community, like Akeo, who I worked with at the state of Iowa. And I sat down and talked with Dr. Yogi Shah, who's head of Broadlawns.
Yep.
And we talked about the socioeconomic issues of people's health.
Yeah.
And what's happened in this country is folks who are on the lower end of the financial spectrum, which unfortunately tends to be our black and brown communities in many cases, don't have as much access to affordable quality healthcare. Don't have as much access to good, clean food to keep them healthy.
Yeah.
Don't have an opportunity to keep a safe roof over their head that keeps them warm and cozy in the cold winters that we have here. Don't have an opportunity for a job that pays them as well, education, let's just go on and on. And so what that means is people in our black communities develop more health conditions, and when they get something like COVID, they have a greater rate of dying because of comorbidity, because they have underlying conditions that were developed as a result of systemic issues that created those that position for them. So that's, to me, I don't want people to forget this. We have to come out of COVID and fix COVID, right?
Yeah.
Right.
We've got to make sure that we're protecting people during this pandemic, and we need to make sure that our black communities have the protections that they need. That's to your point.
Yep.
Everybody should be wearing masks so that we quit the spread. Because when certain populations, like our black population, our older Americans here, Iowans, we have a big problem with that as well, with our older Iowans dying. When they catch it, the chances are much worse for them.
Yep.
So if we're going to fix this with COVID, first of all, we need a national plan.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that we're keeping people safe by wearing masks, by social distancing, by making sure we're doing all the cleaning and sanitization, that within our schools and businesses, churches, whatever, those folks can afford to have the PPE that they need to put all those practices in place. Right now, we're being held up in Congress because the Republicans don't want to pass state and local funding to help us shore up those expenses, and we're having a hard time keeping up with that. So with COVID, first and foremost, we got to keep people safe. Secondly, with COVID, we got to put money in people's pockets. And so everybody who's lost jobs, those who were already on the margins to begin with, those who are at risk of being evicted from their rental property.
Come on, talk about it.
You know, they have got to be protected, because the last thing that we need to do is put people out on the streets in the middle of a pandemic. And folks are losing their jobs, and at the same time, they're losing their health insurance as a result of it. We've tried to extend coverage into the ACA for folks and free coverage for COVID. Those are being pushed back on. So there's two issues here. It's address the issues with COVID, make sure that we're protecting our black communities by putting parameters in place that literally everybody should follow. This isn't about, this is about keeping every single person safe, and therefore we're going to keep folks in our black community safe. But then as we move through this, it's about addressing those underlying issues that I mentioned earlier, because if it wasn't for those that have extended themselves for so long in this country, so many black people would not have so many health issues that have been created because of those systemic issues, which has caused this increase in deaths in our black community. So I look at this from a two-pronged perspective.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm like listening and taking notes. Then I'm like, oh yeah, it's my turn to ask a question. I'm supposed to be asking my question next. Okay, got it. And I'm getting the mic thing going. I'm making sure I'm looking at my folks. Okay, they hear me loud and clear, hollering into the mic today. Voting. Voting is so huge. Everywhere you look, everyone and their mama is talking about voting. You need to vote early. Did you vote today? Let's watch this debate. Let's watch that debate. But on a more factual basis, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, fighting for those rights, they were instituted, right?
Yep.
Then you have poll taxes. You have other things that have come into play that that do impede people's right to vote.
Yep.
Our state has given voting rights back to those with felonies on their record. Bravo, great for that. But what does sending you back to Congress look like? How does that impact voting? Knowing that there are some decisions being made now about Supreme Court Justice, I forget her name right now, but
Amy.
Talking about putting someone in the Supreme Court Justice, and that body, the same body that gave rights back to states individually, dismantling the Voting Rights Act of 1965. What does that look like to send you back to Congress, and how does that impact voting?
It looks like solving this problem is what that means, sending me back to Congress and giving us a Democratic House majority, hopefully a Democratic Senate, and a Democratic president, because we've passed bills out of the House already to make sure that we don't have voter suppression. The very first bill that we passed out of the House, H.R. 1, was a sweeping bill to bring ethics back to Congress. Let me tell you, we need to make sure we hold bad people accountable, bad actors accountable, no matter what jobs they have.
Yeah.
To make sure that we took money out of politics, which, by the way, is one of the key factors behind so much of this. And then the third piece is to make sure that every voter had a voice. We established within the House the Office of Voter Integrity. Representative Marcia Fudge is in charge of that.
She is.
She has been working with states around the country.
Congressional Black Caucus member.
Yep. Obviously in the Carolinas, we've had some issues. We've been working on with states like that. So we immediately out of the gate said, this is an issue and we've got to fix it. So that's first and foremost. Secondly, we voted, and so sad to see our wonderful colleague and civil rights leader John Lewis pass away this year. But in his honor, we passed the Voting Rights Advancement Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, to make sure, to your point, that the Voting Rights Act of 1965 actually was really put into law. I mean, it has been it has been attacked right and left since the year I was born. So now you know how old I am. So we knew that we needed to honor him, number one. Number two, issues like this, issues like many issues that the Supreme Court could be addressing, we've got to make sure that we codify. We put them into law so that we don't run a risk. The other piece is we have looked to make sure that whatever we do within the COVID bills, we're ensuring that people's vote is protected. Yeah. We have supported funding for the United States Postal Service to ensure that they've got the resources to get everybody's ballot out to them and then back in. We have put money in for voter integrity and fighting back against voter suppression at the polls right now. I'll tell you the truth. The Senate doesn't want to see that in there. Unfortunately, I think too many folks on the other side think that know that their way to win is to suppress people's votes. So we're going to keep addressing this issue. We are adamant to make sure that this gets addressed. We should not be in 2020 where any American feels that their vote doesn't count and that they are in a position where somebody's trying to keep them from making sure that they vote. Unacceptable.
Well, Congresswoman Axne, thank you so much. We have one last thing that we want to talk about, which obviously that I believe all of this kind of encompasses within within that one thing, and that's social justice, right? You and I have been on the phone talking about the moments where KO and other members were down there putting their bodies on the line to help protect those and their freedom of speech from being, whether it's tear gassed or shot with rubber bullets. And we know that the death of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and many others that, I mean, we could spend a whole show naming people. And thank God Jacob Blake did die, and he can speak for himself, and he could tell the story himself. And now the young man out in close to Chicago, who was just killed by police officers. What are your thoughts on this whole movement with this social justice piece, with the Black Lives Matter and all of this stuff that's happening? This thing really grappled our country during the summer, and it hasn't stopped, and it doesn't. I know we're not going to stop, so there is no stop in sight right now, and it's going to continue to apply pressure, continue to ask elected officials, Democrat and Republican, to show up and show their support. So what are your thoughts about all of this?
Yeah, well, let me just say, Michael Brown, I remember driving home on a road trip, 2014, I think that was.
Yep.
When a young man who's now the age of my oldest son was shot and killed in the prime of his life in Ferguson, Missouri. And I remember coming back from visiting one of our national parks for a trip with my boys.
Yeah.
And we turned it on and listened the entire way on National Public Radio for the entire day as this unfolded. And here we are 6 years later with Black moms, and I'm a mom, and this is why this sits really hard with me, who still have to wonder, and let me just say, Michael Brown, there's so many before that too, we know that, who still have to wonder if their son will make it home, if their daughter takes her hands off the steering wheel, if she gets pulled over, will get shot.
Yep.
That is not something that I have to worry about as a white woman. And we've all got to take this seriously. These are our neighbors. These are our friends. These are our children.
Yeah.
These are our children. And the fact that we have not put pieces in place, still to this day, when so many young Black children are dying, it's unacceptable as a country. We should never have been here. So, you know, I folks have said to me, you know, what do you think about this? I say, you know what? I'm a white woman who sits here with a lot of luxury from the fact of I've got white skin. You know, it doesn't matter if you're poor, you're rich, or whatever. It's the color of your skin that puts you in a different position in this country. If you if you feeling uncomfortable when you go into a certain neighborhood. You know, I've got one of my good friends and colleagues, Colin Allred, Representative Allred from Texas, about as smart a guy as you can get. Not just an NFL player, but a Rhodes Scholar too. And, you know, incredible Black man. And he's told me the stories. You know, here's a congressman who has seemingly had a very successful life. And throughout his whole growing up, he's from Dallas area, had to drive around certain neighborhoods, couldn't go through them. And his mom said, you do not go through those neighborhoods.
Wow.
To go to football practice or to do whatever. Now, so what this means is that it's time we fix this. It's time that people stand up. I am so glad to see people exercising their First Amendment rights. It's exciting to see young people saying enough is enough. And, you know, we've got to make sure that we address this. It's why we put the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act into law that addresses multiple issues, of course, including banning of chokeholds and other dangerous, activities that officers engage in that put people in unsafe conditions, that ensures that we don't move officers from one precinct or locale to another. So we set up a national database, obviously has racial bias training and support for our police officers and the whole stations themselves to be more understanding of what needs to be done. And that's just the beginning of it. Make sure that there's no discrimination against color of skin or religion. So much of it needs to be addressed, and I was so grateful to see, Akeo and Ross Wilburn and Phyllis and so many other great representatives that we've got here in Iowa stand up and say, we're going to put something in place. I was so proud to go back to Washington and tell our Congressional Black Caucus we got this done in Iowa, and before many other states did.
Yep.
And it's a really good mirroring of what's at a federal level. So listen, it's time we make a change. It's time that we level the playing field. It's time that we create equity among all people in this country, and it starts by addressing racial inequity within our policing system.
Yeah, I just want everybody to be very clear. This is not a black versus white thing. This is not a black versus police thing. This isn't everybody versus wrong and everybody versus injustice. There is no anti-anyone in this thing. This is anti-wrong.
Right.
And that's what this is about, right? And I hate when people try to turn it into more like, they're going against the police. No,
right.
It's
Absolutely.
not that. It's not that at all. Chief Potts in Ankeny, amazing guy. Love him, right? I've Chief out in Waterloo, amazing guy. Love him, right? This isn't like an anti-anything. This is an equitable approach to people who literally fear their life being taken in moments of distress, right? I mean, look at all of the black people who have lost their lives because somebody called the police to do a welfare check. And, oh, behold, who was that? Tatiana, I can't even, was her last name Taylor as well? I think so. We'll fact check that, but so that's where we find ourselves.
So, Cindy, if somebody wants to get more information about you, where do they go to learn more about you in our couple of days that we have left? I won't give you a number because when this airs, it'll be different than today. So,
check us out online at cindyaxneforcongress.com. You can find us on Instagram or Facebook at Cindy Axne for Congress. You can use FOUR or just the digit 4. But the best thing, if you're going online, go to my website. You can really see where all the policy is. Then you can sign up to, you can like us on all the social media platforms so that you can, see what we're up to on a regular basis. I'm going to be out with a lot of folks next week at the NAACP march for to get votes out.
Yep.
At our Black Forum as well.
Yep.
And so come out, talk to me. I'd love to talk with folks. And we've got to get people out to vote. We absolutely need to. For far too long, too many people have sat on the sidelines in this country not voting. There are more people who don't vote than vote in this country that could, and that's a really sad place to be. And I'll tell you, I tell all young people, your moment of power is at the ballot box.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If young people came out to vote, they determine every darn election that we have. Get out and vote, for God's sake. I mean, if you want to see a change, vote.
Yep.
We can't do it without people voting.
Right.
And we're not going to be able to implement the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act or the John Lewis Voter Rights Advancement Act unless we have the right people,
Most people go vote.
in both the House, the Senate, and the presidency.
Right.
That's it. That's really it. And so we need people to vote. If you want to see bills like that passed, you vote for the people who have supported those, who have written those bills, who are fighting for those things. And without their voices, and that's why people need to understand, their voice is so important because their voice determines who sits there and makes sure that their voice is represented.
Absolutely.
Well, Cindy Axne, thank you so much for coming on. I just want to point this out real quick, Shekinah, before we take the break. People, those who are hung up on Biden and Trump, I want y'all to understand, they make no laws. They make no laws.
That's very true.
Yeah, I want y'all to understand this very clearly when y'all watch us. No matter who sits at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, they make no laws. Who makes the laws are congressional members and senators. So if your concern is a policy, you need to be focusing on your congressional members and your senators. Don't get hyped up in the hoopla of who's running for president, because I know a lot of people are like, oh my God, who do we choose? Whoop-de-woo. Don't listen.
Who's confused? Who is confused?
Don't even go there. Don't even go there.
We're bipartisan.
Don't even go there. But I want y'all to, I just had to point this out.
Yes.
the president makes no laws.
So even though that's important,
Yes.
right? Don't stop at 1600
Exactly.
There's a lot that's going on our ballot, especially in Iowa, and we have to be informed. You can go to your polling location, your early voting polling location, and take a picture of the sample ballot. I did a couple weeks ago and called Rob about some stuff like, how do we get more information on these folks? And so that's really important, right? You want to start out being engaged. You want to see change. The temperature is right. To all my cooks, you know, you put the pot on the stove, the water starts boiling, you know you're ready to cook, right? The water is boiling, people. We have an opportunity. And so if you care about voting, if you care about voting rights, if you care about your access to food, how close a grocery store is in your neighborhood, if you care about your health, if you care about your grandma's health, somebody else's grandma's health, if you care about social justice, if you care about equality, you need to vote.
Yep.
Period. There is no other option.
Take us to break.
Absolutely. So, a couple of reminders. Robbie J, keep me honest. November 3rd is the day that we vote, right? If you're not voting early, that's the last day to vote. If you are not registered to vote early, then you need to bring 2 forms of ID, a piece of mail and an ID.
Yep, either a piece of mail and an ID, or your ID and your voter registration card.
Bring 2 things that verify who you are. One of them should be your vote. Just bring everything. The kitchen sink if you got to. It's that important, right? So bring 2 forms of ID in addition to your voter registration card. I don't know. I'll be messing that part up. Robbie J gonna fix it. But early voting is up through November 2nd. You know, you early up until the deadline. The deadline is the 3rd. Be on time. Ain't no like be there or be square. Be there. Ain't no other option, right? If you have questions about voting, iwillvote.com/Iowa, iwillvote.com/Iowa. If you have questions about our 3rd Congressional District Congresswoman, Cindy Axne, visit her website at cindyaxneforcongress.com.
Yep. Yeah. Cindy, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate everything that you're doing in our community. And good luck out there.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. It's such a pleasure, and thank you for all that you do for our community. And Reverend, we're just so grateful for the leadership that you provide in this area. Thanks for all you do.
Hey, we'll see y'all soon. Hey, you're watching the Urban Impact Show. I'm one of your hosts, Rob Johnson.
I'm the favorite, Shekinah.
Yo, and we'll be right back.
I'll see you later.